Neil asked, well, what is shadow work? Like, what is it really? And shadow work and Tantra are very confusing things. And the mistake that most people get into when they're embarking on shadow work or embarking on Tantra is they stop at, the initial stages of the work. And so I just wrote down like, a couple of notes here. Like the first thing we're doing in shadow work is we're becoming quiet and we're just looking. We're looking at the places where we get in trouble, where we lose energy, where we are bleeding or hemorrhaging energy. And, so we identify the shadow. So for most people, like common shadows would be addiction, and like when I was a kid in art class, we would all make an ashtray for our fathers, because every father just smoked, and after work, they'd drive to the gas station and they'd spend however many dollars it was on cigarettes, maybe they'd buy a carton of cigarettes and, they'd spend all this time just smoking. In the olden days, you'd go to the doctor and the doctor would literally blow smoke in your face. It's just if anyone can remember those days. And so it's just this sick, twisted waste of energy that so many people on planet Earth did through, say tobacco addiction. Is they gave their money, they gave their power, eventually they gave their body away to this addiction, and this addiction of feeling some kind of temporary high from smoking a cigarette. And, then it took over their soul, took over their power. So like smoking would be an addiction. This would be in a shadow, would be a shadow form of power. Now, most people, at some point in their life have been addicted to intimacy. And I've worked with a lot of young men who've, grown up with like pornography online, and they're just addicted to this thing. And the important thing is to look at the addiction, to look at the shadow and see that there's something good in it. Now, the desire for intimacy and for connection, that's a beautiful thing. But to experience that with the boringness, the deadness of, like, let's say, pornography or video games, or, just getting like little crappy high from, smoking a cigarette, that's not the ultimate truth. So anytime we're doing shadow work, we look at what is the ultimate truth here. The ultimate truth is I want true, healthy, happy, connected, heartfelt intimacy. And so we have to let go of the lesser thing, and we gather up our energy and we walk in the direction of the higher manifestation. So at the heart of every shadow, at the heart of every addiction, is the desire for some divine quality. Again, with sexual intimacy, the true desire is sexual union. Catherine brought this up, this union with the divine, a union with life. But in the shadow, we chase after it in these lower forms, these forms that what the Buddha said, they don't last, they're temporary. They're temporary, they're impermanent, they're fleeting. So most of us in our shadow, there is this aspect of going after the true thing, but we go after it in an egoic form, which will always be fleeting, which will never last, will never be permanent. When we do shadow work, we are choosing to go after the same thing in its true form. That's the Tantra of it. That's the transmutation. So the first stage of shadow work is going to be just noticing, okay, what is my shadow? The second stage is going to be identifying and owning the shadow. And most people stop there. And this is where people say, oh, I have a shadow around sexuality, so I'm going to get on Tinder and just start sleeping around with everyone. I'm doing shadow work. It's like, no, that's not doing shadow work. That's doing shadow play. That's doing shadow expression. There's shadow work there. I love when people come to me, real sophisticated spiritual people. They tell me they're going to do shadow work in the realm of sexuality. They say, I'm going to be polyamorous. I'm going to explore my shadow. Well, that's not helping. That's not healing. That's just creating more confusion. That's like saying, I'm going to go try all the different cigarettes and see which one I like the best. That's not shadow work. That's not shadow work. Going to the bar saying, I need to try all the different drinks. Like, that's not shadow work. Shadow work is identifying, say if it's with alcohol, it's, I like to lose myself. I like to get drunk on alcohol. What Yogananda said is, I want to be drunk on God, on life, on spiritual union. Again, at the heart of every shadow is a true desire to be free, to be enlightened, to be awake, to be merged with God. And so again, for example, with alcohol, we identify, okay, I have an issue with alcohol. There's something within me that likes to to get lost, to cut loose, to step beyond like this edginess, this irritability, this feeling of being separate. So I'm just going to go get drunk. But instead of getting drunk, we say, I want to merge with the divine. I want to merge into, like with alcohol, if you feel into the energy of alcohol, often it's, I want to merge into peace and relief. Most people, when they drink alcohol, at first, they feel this sense of relief. When we do shadow work, we choose to do something healthy like yoga and child's pose and meditation and help the body to feel a great sense of relief and ease and freedom. And with alcohol, it's like carelessness. In the realm of meditation, it is carefree. I open into the consciousness of Shiva. Shiva knows it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and he doesn't need to drink. He meditates all the time. All the time. All the time. He doesn't get drink to get drunk. He meditates to empty out into a space of freedom. So with shadow work, we have to be willing to look into the darkness and see what is the truth in it. Now, a lot of us struggle with the shadow of anger. I certainly have throughout my life. And so I presented to the world as a really quiet, young fella who could get along with anyone and everything. But I was always the one who would show up first, but I would put myself at the end of the line. I'd let everyone go before me. I'd let people take advantage of me. Throughout this lifetime, I've let people steal tens of thousands of dollars from me. Because in my shadow of wanting to appear nice and kind and sweet and serene and being a pleaser, I let life take advantage of me. Now, in my shadow was this angst, this fire that would get really upset when nobody was around. And so with my shadow work, I had to acknowledge, yes, there's peaceful Craig, but there's also like this angry, fiery one within me who reminded me a lot of my abusive father. And so in my shadow, I always said, no, that's not me. That's not me. When I was doing my shadow work, I had to acknowledge, no, that is me. That is an aspect of me. It's an aspect of my power, which I have repressed. And because I've repressed it, the world takes advantage of me. And so when I began to embrace this fire, it was very uncomfortable, very unpleasant. And I began to have these feelings. Catherine brought them forward beautifully today. She said this feeling of wanting to kill or destroy or like just hate everyone or everything or hate this world or hate this earth. And I had to acknowledge, oh, there was that in me too, like this, a killer in me. But as I fully embraced the killer, I didn't go out into the world and kill more. I actually went out into the world as this energy of great peace, but at its center, having this warrior within me, this strength within me, this power within me. And now I go out into the world and people do not take advantage of me. Occasionally, occasionally someone might try to, but most people, they're not messing with me because I'm standing in my power and I stand in my peace. If I just stand in my peace, people take advantage of me all day long. But when I stand in my power and my truth, I don't need to fight with anyone. They just see that guy and they say, I don't want to mess with him. I don't want to mess with him. And so I do know how to fight. I do know how to kill. I do know how to destroy, but I don't have to use those things in the world. Now, if there was a time when I did have to use them, it'd just be like a tool that I could wield. But most of the time, because this energy of power is in my presence, the shadow has been integrated, and I live in a much more balanced life where people aren't taking advantage of me like they did in the past. So this is how we do shadow work. So often it starts with a willingness, like if we have an issue, say, with repressed power, it starts with a willingness that we got to get a little bit dirty. We have to be able to speak up and to speak out and defend ourselves and speak our truth. But true shadow work at the end of the day isn't just us angry at the whole world. No, it is us empowered, connected to our power, manifesting our power internally. And the world will feel it and the world will respond. And one of the great things about Neil is, like, Neil is this amazing performer. And if Neil's going to sing at the Abbey Theatre in Dublin, there's going to be a big crowd there. And they're going to be moved to tears by Neil's power. And so that's a manifestation of Neil's true power. Now, if we find ourselves irritated and irritable in life, it's often because our power is repressed, is oppressed or repressed, or it's also because we haven't given ourselves permission to speak up and tell someone, like, hey, get your hands off me or don't touch me. Or and sometimes, like, again, when we live in a place of empowerment, like with my father, when he walked in the room, no one was going to go touch my father. No one was going to be, getting too close to him because he looked like a bulldog. His nickname was a bulldog. He used to have this big tattoo of a bulldog, on his forearm. And it was just like, you're not messing with my dad. People didn't mess with him. He wasn't an enormous guy. He actually looked like a bulldog. He was, he wasn't tall. Like, he was just stout. He was just stout and just this presence. And you looked at him like he wouldn't have to discipline us. Like, as a kid, I just look at my dad. If he was looking at me, I knew I had to behave. He didn't have to say it. He didn't have to say it. It was just manifest. And so, in a sense, for most of us, like, as we do our shadow work, it doesn't come into this big thing where we have to go out into the world and tell the whole world to shut up. You don't have to fight with the world. When we do our shadow work, it just becomes inherent. Now, it might move into a greater sense of expression, and in a sense, like this museum that I was speaking about down in, in Mexico City, that Pepe Soho brought forward is a manifestation of the embodiment of truth, the embodiment of art, the embodiment of power, the embodiment of light, the embodiment of liberation, the embodiment of kundalini Shakti coming into form. And it's a beautiful thing. So when we do shadow work, sometimes it's just inherent and people just know not to mess with us. Sometimes we do our shadow work and we go after the thing we truly want instead of the thing that our ego wants. And sometimes, the embodiment of our shadow looks like a grand expression. And so we are the one that has to look at this and have to play with it. For most of us, shadow work will be a messy endeavor. But we don't end shadow work with a mess. It normally begins with a mess. It says, okay, I'm willing to get dirty. I'm willing to find the darkness within me. I'm willing to explore it. I'm willing to get to know it. I'm willing to embody it. And I'm willing to invite it to grow up so that it expresses something greater than simply an animal nature. And when we do so, we might find that Shiva, we have a nature that's like Shiva, that can sit in deep meditation, but we also have a nature like Shiva that can dance and can be wild and that can create and that can destroy and that can build and can express great love and freedom and truth and art here in this beautiful world.